Hey everyone, welcome back. In the previous episode, we have talked about how we can use identity to set up infrastructure regarding our authentication process, how we can store users, claims in the database, and how identity provides us with easy to access methods regarding signing in and creating users. In this episode, we're going to take a look at authorization and how we can use claims and the built-in policies functionality to create some interesting authorization scenarios. Now, let's go ahead into our basic example. And the first thing that I want to mention is this authorize attribute basically contains information regarding how we want to authorize. And it's sort of, I want you to think of it as a tag, right? It's an authorization tag, it's an authorization attribute, and we can give it some more information to specify what kind of tag it is. Like, if you have a package, you can basically tag it as fragile, etc. Right? So we're tagging it as authorized, and then we want to specify how we're going to authorize it. So the basis of the authorization functionality consists of authorization requirements, and the authorization requirements are processed by authorization handlers. And in essence, they both make up an authorization policy. So we have a trifecta. We have a requirement which is processed by a handler, and this makes up a policy. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at how this actually looks like. Okay, so if we go into services and we add authorization, we can go ahead and specify a configuration in here. And inside this configuration, we have access to the default policy. And if we take and also we can add our own policies, fallback policies, etc. But let's focus on sort of what we get by default, right? So we have this authorization attribute. Let's see what it is, but let's take it apart. So what this says here is it gets or sets the default authorization policy. Defaults to require authenticated users. Okay, so the default implementation is to just authenticate a user. So let's go ahead and override this with the same implementation. Okay, so what we want to do is let's check what type it is. So I'm going to go ahead and press F12 on add authorization, and this authorization options, let's go ahead and check it out. And in here, default policy is of type authorization policy, and authorization policy can be created by this authorization policy builder. So let's go ahead and grab this class, and we're just going to go ahead and construct our own authorization policy. Basically, this is the builder pattern. If you don't know too much about it, go ahead and just Google the builder pattern, C#, and you should get a bit more of an idea of what it is. But let's go ahead and create our var default auth builder. Okay, so this builder is used to construct one particular authorization policy. So we're gonna use an import, and now we're gonna go ahead and construct default auth policy, for which we're gonna grab our builder, and we're just gonna build. So we're just gonna construct a flat one, nothing is there, and we're gonna assign it, just so we can get rid of these errors. So put it there. Okay, this builder has a set of functions. So same as we can chain these functions here, we can chain the building blocks on this object. And in here we have stuff like add authentication schemas, add requirements, and add requirements is you can see it accepts an IAuthorizationRequirement requirement. This is one of the trifecta parts, and the thing that we are looking for is require authenticated user. So you can think of this as a built-in rule to really just help you use well-known requirements, and this is just kind of the implementation, right? You're going to make an authorization attribute, you're going to want an authenticated user, so you're most likely going to want to build this. And under the hood, this is exactly how the default policy is built up. So let's go ahead and see it work. I'm going to launch my application. I'm going to make sure that /home/secret still works. It redirected me to index. And now if I go there again, it allows me to enter it. And now let's delete this cookie. And what I will do is I will add or require a claim. Yeah, I'll require a claim. And let's go ahead and grab one of the claim types, which we don't have here. And this claim type is just going to be date of birth. Okay, so I want whoever, by default, I want my users to have a date of birth claim. Okay, so let's go ahead and relaunch this. I will give this a refresh, so I'm going to re-authenticate. Now I'm going to try to reach it again. I'm going to get an access denied. And this is because now by default, it's asking me for a date of birth. Okay, but let's comment this out. This is essentially what happens under the hood by the default constructors. So now you should have an idea of how an authorization policy is constructed. So when I say an authorization policy, I mean this object here. Okay, and an authorization policy, if we go in here, in the constructor, you can see it accepts a list of requirements and authentication schemas. Now, a list of requirements is what it sounds like. You basically provide it with objects which implement this interface, and what this essentially allows it to do is process these requirements using a handler. Okay, and then you have authentication schemas, which are mappings to the authentication schemas that you have specified here. So not to add too many things into the mix, let's go ahead and focus on the other two parts. So we have taken a look at creating an authorization policy using the authorization builder. Let's go ahead and take a look at creating a requirement. So we're gonna basically go down a level, and we're gonna be able to add our own requirements into the builder. So require authenticated user and require claim are the requirements that are requirement extension methods kind of provided to us, but we want to be able to specify our own requirements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to essentially create a duplicate functionality for this. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to create a new folder in here, and I'm going to call these authorization requirements folder. And let's go ahead and just say, I'll copy this name, and here I'll just say custom require claim. Okay, just to have a bit of a differentiation. And what I will do is I will grab this IAuthorizationRequirement interface, and I will inherit from it. So it doesn't need me to implement any sort of stuff here, but what I will do is I will create a constructor, and what I want to do exactly the same thing. I want to just accept a string to specify what claim it is. So string claim type, and let's go ahead and make a property claim type. How I want you to think of a requirement is a request to authenticate. Same way that you make a request to a server for an HTTP page, you're making a request to the authorization middleware to get authorized, and that is going to give you a response. Rather here, it's sort of, instead of giving a response, it mutates the authorization context, and it does that using the handlers. Okay, so let's create the handler, the thing that is going to process this request. Let's go ahead, just copy the name and call it handler, and this is going to be an authorization handler of type custom require claim. So the name of this doesn't really matter. What matters is that this is an authorization handler, and it implements the IAuthorizationHandler interface. Now, the easiest way to remember this structure is that you have a requirement. So something is required to pass your question of, are you allowed to go here? So you're really here, what you're asking is the context of the question. You're allowed to go here if you have this claim type. And then basically the person can answer with what claim type he has. All right, so treat this requirement as a request to get authorized by the handler. Okay, so enough rambling on. Let's go ahead and implement the abstract class, and this has just one function, which I'm going to format a little bit so we can take a look at it. So this is the authorization context, which will get edited based on how our authorization process is going. And this is the requirement. So this is pretty much the answer that we get, right? So let's go ahead and play out this scenario. Some dude walks up to me and he's like, I want to come to this secret action. I'm going to say, do you have this claim type, right? So then what we're going to do is we're going to grab the context, we're going to grab the user, and we're going to grab the claims. So mind you, user is our claims principal, where we have registered all our claims, etc. So we will have access to these claims when the user was created, and that's the same way that it gets created in the side identity functions when it says sign in, but that user is constructed from the stuff that is the data that is held in the database. And all we're gonna do is import linked, so we can use the any method, and we're gonna say type equals request claim type. Okay, and let's just say var has claim equals. So if we have the claim, we want to say that this handler has been successful. So context succeeded, and we can say requirement. So this requirement has succeeded. Otherwise, we can just return that task has completed. And this is just so we can exit this task safely. We're not performing any asynchronous operations. So the main thing to take away from this is that this is a request, and this is the thing that handles the request. And this process is going to be utilized by an authorization policy. So an authorization policy is going to hold all the requirements, and then it's going to throw these requirements at the authorization middleware, at the authorization middleware, which will then resolve these handlers from the dependency injection container, and it's going to pass stuff to this function. And then at the end, we'll end up with a context that either passed all the requirements or not. Okay, so let's go ahead and register this. Again, to bring your attention back, I am trying to model this require claim function. Okay, so let's grab the config, and we're going to add a policy. And this policy is going to be claim.date of birth. And in here, I want to pass my authorization policy. And the way I create an authorization policy, I can either create it here like this, or another overload function is that we can just start using the builder inside. And we don't have to call .build on it, it will do it automatically. So let's just create auth, or rather policy builder. And in here, what we could have said to mimic this function is require claim, and let's just pass this object here, like so. So this is what we're trying to mimic. So I'm gonna comment and copy this and comment it here. So I can then just say add requirements. Okay, so we're gonna add a requirement to the list, and our requirement is going to be this custom require claim. So we're just gonna go ahead and pass a new object, and specifically we're going to be requiring this claim type. Okay, now one thing is we will need to add our handler to the dependency injection container. So let's go ahead, grab our class name, and we will need to go into services and add a scope. This can be singleton, but again, bear in mind that this has access to the dependency injection container because it is getting added to it. So if you're going to add a service to it, this is the reason you would want to create your own handler and say custom claims is if you want to communicate with the database or you want to communicate with some service. You can inject your database and services in here, so you will need to give it a second thought if you want to make it a singleton or a scoped or a transient. Here I'm just going to make it scoped. If you're following along, scoped is probably going to be the safest option for you. And let's add IAuthorizationHandler. So remember that the authorization middleware is going to bring up all the authorization policies that we register here, and it's going to look at the policy and it's going to see the requirements, and then it will take the requirement and it's going to try to find a service to process this requirement. Okay, and by the time it has processed all the requirements, it's going to see if all the requests have succeeded. And once all the requests have succeeded, it's going to go ahead and tell you, right, are you allowed to go here or not? And that's how the question gets resolved. So make sure that you add your handler to this to the services, and you register your requirement with whatever policy that you're configuring. And if you want to make this an extension method like so, we can grab the AuthorizationPolicyBuilder, and let's go here, and I will create a public static class extensions. Okay, and let's create a public static authorization builder, and we'll say require custom claim this builder. Let me drop this to a new line. So again, at this point, this is not really authentication, but it's fun to do these extension methods. So what do we want to do? We want to put this here, but we want to supply our own string claim type, and we want to put this here, and we want to call this function on the builder like this. Nice. And now we can just go ahead, call this function here, and claim types a date of birth. Supply it here. Okay, so we essentially have created a duplicate functionality, but it's nice to know how this sort of stuff works under the hood, and it really helps you to understand the whole concept of it. So I'm not going to repeat it myself again. You can rewind if you want to know what the trifecta does again. Let's go ahead and launch this and see what's happening. Let's give this a refresh. So we have the cookie. I'm going to delete this. And I don't have the date of birth cookie, so this should still forbid me. Do I have... Okay, I didn't actually create a... What's it called? An endpoint that will authorize it. So let's go ahead and specify here policy. So if we go on the authorize attribute, we can either specify a policy, or roles is another well-known .NET mechanism for authorization. We'll talk about this in a second. But this is how you... policy is the new default way, and this is what the whole mechanism is built on. Let's go ahead, copy this name, and put it here. And we can say secret policy, and we can just return the same view here so we don't get an error for the page. Let's go ahead and refresh this. There's the secret, go to home, so we get our cookie, secret policy, okay, and we still get access denied. So now if we add our date of birth, so 11/11/2000, okay, let's launch this, and let's refresh. I'll delete the cookie again. Let's go to home secret. Oh, secret, we got the cookie, and now let's go to secret policy, and we can access this route. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a bit of a better understanding of how policy works under the hood, and what the requirement is, and how it gets processed by the handler. And if you need to, you can make your own extension methods, but that is really overkill. So now let's take let's talk a little bit about this role. So I'm just gonna create another endpoint, and we're gonna call this a secret role. And let's grab this role thing, and let's just say admin. So what's this role thing? I haven't been around for too long in the .NET scene, but I presume this is legacy code or a sort of legacy support, but it's well known. And in .NET, role is just another claim. So to prove this, what I will do is I will go here, and at the moment, so I'm not going to reset this cookie. I will just go to /home/secret role, and we're going to get access denied. But now let's add another claim type, and we'll call it role, and we will say admin. Okay, and now let's go ahead and refresh our cookie to that. So let's go back here, refresh the cookie, so home secret. It would have been nice if I had buttons, wouldn't it? Home/role, or not that, rather secret role. There we go. And now I get access to this secret role route. Okay, so let's say if I go ahead and say that my role is admin2 and I'm not the actual admin. Let's go ahead and get authenticated here. We get access to secret, but not secret role. Okay, so under the hood, roles is something that just looks at the claim again, but it's something, some legacy functionality that is meant to work with how older versions of .NET and .NET Core work. The newer versions are trying to use this policy, and again, we can just implement the admin policy in the same way that we have, in the same way that this role is implemented. So we can go ahead and say config add policy. We can call it admin, and policy builder already exposes a what's it called, an extension method. So require role. We can either require role or we can require claim, and we can say claim types role, and value is admin. So we're looking for that specific thing. Again, roles are just something legacy, and it's just a nice thing to have for backwards compatibility, or if you're just choosing, or if you're not utilizing claims a lot and you just want the roles, so you have roles in your organization and you don't want claims, but claims are really what your user consists of, as you can see from here. So this will be it for the authorization overview. In the next episode, we will look a little bit into some funky stuff that you can do. But for now, this will be it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, leave a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. Have a good day, and as always, see you in my other episodes.